Adam Wilde zipped up his backpack and glanced around the living room, where his mother, Amanda, watched him from the doorway. Her face held a mix of pride and apprehension as she folded her arms across her chest. The house felt emptier since his father's death last year, and moments like these made the absence even heavier. Adam had always been close to his father, and hiking had been their favorite bonding ritual. When his father succumbed to cancer, Adam made a vow to keep their tradition alive. "You sure you're ready for this?" Amanda asked, her voice soft but tinged with worry. Adam smiled, trying to reassure her. "Yeah, Mom, it's just 3 days. I'll be back before you know it." Beside him stood Jessica Matthews, Adam's girlfriend. She was pulling her hair into a ponytail and had a wide smile that seemed to brighten the room. "We'll be fine, Mrs. Wilde, just a quick trip into the woods and back." Amanda nodded, her lips tight. She had always liked Jessica, smart, kind, and grounded, but the woods were vast, and the fear of losing someone else gnawed at her. "All right," she said finally, "but call me the second you get back." After loading their gear into the trunk of Adam's battered Subaru, the two waved goodbye to Amanda and set off. The 3-day trip to the secluded hiking trail near Forest Creek had been planned meticulously by Adam. It was the same place he and his father had ventured to countless times. This time, it would be different, just him and Jessica, making their own memories while honoring his dad. Amanda stood at the window, watching the car disappear down the road, her heart heavy with the feeling of loss that never quite left her. She didn't know that would be the last time she would ever see her son. The morning of the 4th day was colder than usual, and Amanda woke with a jolt. She instinctively reached for her phone, expecting to see a missed call or at least a message from Adam, but the screen remained blank, showing nothing but the time, 7:23 a.m. "Strange," she muttered, pressing radial. The phone rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Maybe they were still on the road back, or the signal could be weak out there in the wilderness. Adam had mentioned they might not have service the entire trip. Still, something felt off. As the day wore on, Amanda's worry deepened. By noon, she had left several voicemails for her son. Her fingers trembled as she dialed again, this time calling Jessica's parents, Sarah and Thomas Matthews. "Hi, Amanda," Sarah answered. "How are the kids?" Amanda's heart dropped. "I don't know. I haven't heard from Adam or Jessica. I thought they'd be back by now." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a quick, tense exchange of words between Sarah and Thomas. "We'll be there in 15 minutes, Sarah finally said. "Don't worry, we'll figure this out." Within half an hour, Sarah and Thomas arrived at Amanda's house. The mood was grim as the three of them sat down at the kitchen table, tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. "Did you try the ranger station?" Thomas asked, his voice firm but with an edge of panic creeping in. Amanda shook her head. "Not yet. Maybe I'm overreacting. It's only been a few hours." "You're not overreacting," Sarah said, squeezing Amanda's hand. "Let's call them. We'll figure this out together." The ranger station confirmed that no reports of any issues had come in, and no one matching Adam or Jessica's descriptions had been spotted. Panic truly set in after that call. Within an hour, Detective Martin Holland, a seasoned investigator from the local precinct, was looped in on the case. He immediately issued a search for the license plate and make of Adam's Subaru. By sunset, the group had driven out to the trailhead where Adam and Jessica were supposed to begin their hike. It was eerily quiet, and the sight of the deserted parking lot sent a chill through Amanda's spine. There were no signs of Adam's car, no sign that they had ever been there at all. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the forest floor as Amanda, Sarah, and Thomas stood at the trailhead. The quiet hum of nature was the only sound in the background. Detective Martin Holland had sent a search party, but they hadn't found anything unusual yet. No cars, no belongings. It was as if Adam and Jessica had never arrived. Amanda wrapped her jacket tighter around her, staring down the path that disappeared into the dense woods. "They should have been back," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Thomas, ever the pragmatist, had already scouted a few feet ahead, hands on his hips, scanning the tree lane. "I don't get it." They knew these trails. Adam was practically raised out here. Detective Holland approached, his notebook in hand, his expression somber. He was a tall man in his mid-40s with graying hair at his temples. His reputation for solving missing person cases had made him the go-to investigator for situations like this, but Amanda could tell from the look in his eyes that he wasn't optimistic. "We'll do everything we can to find them," Holland assured, glancing between Amanda and the Matthews. "But I'll be honest, it's strange that the car's not here. If they did park somewhere else, we should have found it by now." Sarah's face grew pale as she held on to Thomas for support. What if something happened to them? What if she stopped herself, shaking her head as if refusing to entertain the worst possibilities? Amanda clenched her fists, her knuckles turning white. She was beyond reassurances. "Can we just start searching the trail, please?" Holland nodded. "We'll head out now, but I want you all to stay close. Don't stray off the main path." As the search party began walking deeper into the woods, Amanda's heart pounded in her chest. The trees seemed to close in around them, the familiar sounds of nature feeling ominous and foreign. Memories of Adam hiking beside her and his father surfaced, and the image of him smiling, carefree, only made her more anxious. As the group trekked further, the sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the leaves. Every rustle of branches made Amanda jump, her eyes darting to every shadow that moved. Her worst fear, losing Adam like she had lost her husband, kept gnawing at her with every step. Suddenly, one of the rangers ahead of the group shouted, "Over here!" Everyone's pace quickened, their breath hitching as they reached the ranger standing by a small clearing just off the trail. Amanda's heart dropped when she saw a weathered hiking boot lying in the dirt, partially hidden under some brush. Her stomach turned as she recognized it instantly. It was Adam's. The moment Amanda saw the boot, her legs gave way, and she had to steady herself against a nearby tree. Her mind raced, refusing to accept the implication. Adam's boot in the middle of nowhere, no sign of him or Jessica. It was too much, too sudden. A tight knot formed in her throat as she struggled to maintain control. Detective Holland crouched down, examining the area around the boot. "Looks like it's been here for at least a day or two," he muttered, glancing up at one of the rangers. "Mark this spot and search the surrounding area. We need to see if there's anything else." Sarah gripped Thomas's arm tightly, her eyes wide with fear. "What does this mean? Could they have gotten lost?" "We won't jump to conclusions just yet," Holland replied, "but the fact that we found a personal item suggests they were at least here recently. We'll need to keep searching, expand the perimeter." The rest of the search party spread out, combing through the surrounding brush. The undergrowth was thick, and visibility was quickly fading as dusk approached. Every rustle of leaves, every distant animal cry seemed amplified in the growing darkness. Amanda couldn't tear her eyes away from the boot. She wanted to believe that Adam had just lost it, that he and Jessica had somehow gotten off course and were making their way back. But deep down, she felt the same gnawing sense of dread she'd had when her husband first fell ill. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Holland motioned for Amanda to follow him a little farther down the trail. "We'll continue searching into the night, but we need to be careful. It's easy to get lost out here when the light fades." They hadn't walked more than a few yards when Amanda noticed something glinting in the fading light. She rushed forward before anyone could stop her and knelt down beside a pile of dried leaves. With trembling hands, she brushed them aside, revealing a small silver chain. Her heart skipped a beat. Jessica's necklace, the one Adam had given her for their anniversary. Amanda held it up, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "This is hers," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Holland took the necklace from her gently, inspecting it under his flashlight. "We're finding more traces of them," he said. "That's a good sign." But Amanda wasn't comforted. The forest suddenly felt suffocating, the darkness closing in. They had found Adam's boot and Jessica's necklace, but no sign of them. It didn't make sense. They wouldn't have just left these things behind willingly. Something had happened to them. Something bad. The forest was swallowed by darkness, the only light coming from the search party's flashlights as they combed the woods deeper and deeper. The air had grown colder, and with each passing minute, Amanda's dread worsened. Her grip tightened on her phone as she dialed Adam's number again, desperate for any sound, any vibration. But like before, there was only silence. Detective Holland's flashlight swept across the trail as he spoke quietly with one of the rangers, his voice low and measured. "We're getting close to the third day now," he said, his words drifting toward Amanda. "This is when things get critical." Critical. Amanda's voice was thin and strained, her patience eroding. "You mean deadly, don't you?" Holland didn't answer right away, his expression grave. "Look, we're doing everything we can to find them, Amanda. The fact that we're finding personal items means they didn't just disappear. We'll get to the bottom of this." Amanda was past the point of reassurances. "Finding their things doesn't mean they're safe, Detective." She looked at him with a wildness in her eyes. "Adam wouldn't have left his boot behind, and Jessica would never take off her necklace. Something happened to them." A tense silence followed as the party moved further into the woods. Even Thomas and Sarah had grown quiet, their faces pale as they huddled together, their eyes scanning every shadow that flitted through the trees. An hour later, when they were well into the heart of the forest, one of the rangers called out again. "Over here. We've got something." Amanda's heart nearly stopped. She ran toward the voice before anyone could hold her back. When she arrived, she found the ranger standing beside a small pile of disturbed earth. A shallow pit had been dug into the ground, and the faint outline of something large, covered in branches and leaves, lay at the bottom. Holland pushed forward, his face tight as he knelt down to inspect it. He carefully pulled the branches aside, revealing what looked like a hastily abandoned campsite: 2 sleeping bags, dirt-covered and partially torn. There were food wrappers scattered around, as if someone had left in a hurry. "This must have been where they set up camp," Holland muttered, pulling out his flashlight to inspect the area closer. "But if this is their camp, why didn't they take anything with them?" Amanda felt a chill run through her, As she crouched beside Holland, she recognized one of the sleeping bags immediately. It was Adam's, the same one his father had bought him when they first started hiking together. Her breath caught in her throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Where are they?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would they leave everything behind like this?" Holland didn't answer. He scanned the area with a hardened gaze, noting the signs of struggle, the disturbed dirt, the bent branches, the items strewn haphazardly across the ground. It didn't look right. This wasn't the aftermath of someone casually packing up and leaving. "They didn't leave willingly," Holland finally said, his voice grim. "Someone or something forced them to go." As the night wore on, the search expanded. Holland's team set up lights around the camp to gather evidence, taking photographs and marking the disturbed earth. The pit in Amanda's stomach only grew as she watched the investigation unfold. The reality of the situation was becoming undeniable. Adam and Jessica hadn't just wandered off. Something much darker had taken them away from here. Sarah stood by one of the trees, shaking her head in disbelief. "This doesn't make sense. They were supposed to be back 2 days ago." Adam knew these woods like the back of his hand. Thomas tried to comfort her, though his voice was strained with fear. Maybe they got lost or hurt. Maybe they're still out there waiting for help. But Amanda knew better. Every instinct told her that this wasn't an accident. They wouldn't leave their things like this, she said, her voice low and tense. "Something happened here." Just as Amanda spoke, a sharp noise pierced through the stillness. It was faint but distinct, a low, mechanical hum coming from deeper in the forest. Everyone stopped, their heads snapping in the direction of the sound. Holland immediately gestured for silence, signaling for the search party to stay alert. "What the hell was that?" one of the rangers muttered, glancing nervously into the darkness. Amanda's heart raced. The sound was out of place, unnatural in the middle of the wilderness. It wasn't the sound of an animal or a forest creaking in the wind. It was something else, something man-made. Without waiting for permission, Amanda started moving toward the noise, her flashlight shaking in her hand. "Adam," she shouted into the night, her voice echoing off the trees. "Jessica, can you hear me?" Holland was quick to follow her, his tone urgent but controlled. "Amanda, wait. We need to stay together." But Amanda wasn't listening. She plunged ahead, following the strange noise as it grew louder. Her pulse quickened with every step. Branches slapped against her face, and the ground became uneven, but she didn't care. All that mattered was finding Adam. Suddenly, the mechanical hum cut off, leaving an eerie silence in its place. Amanda stopped in her tracks, her chest heaving as she scanned the trees around her. The darkness pressed in, suffocating and thick. Amanda, Holland's voice called from behind, but it sounded distant, muffled. And then she saw it. Just ahead, nestled between two towering trees, was a figure. Amanda's breath caught in her throat as she squinted, her flashlight barely illuminating the outline. It was tall, almost unnaturally so, and motionless. For a second, Amanda thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the trees. But then, the figure moved. The silent figure. Amanda froze. Her flashlight trembled in her hand as she struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. The figure stood perfectly still, just out of full view. It was tall, far taller than anyone she had ever seen, and its body seemed oddly proportioned. Her breath came in shallow gasps as a primal instinct gripped her. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, but her feet felt glued to the spot. Amanda, Detective Holland's voice cut through the eerie silence, growing closer, but Amanda couldn't take her eyes off the figure. It didn't seem to be approaching, but it wasn't retreating either. It simply loomed there, almost watching. With a shaky hand, she raised her flashlight higher, hoping to catch a better glimpse. But the moment the beam of light landed on the figure, it vanished. There was no sound, no movement, just an empty patch of forest where it had stood. Amanda's heart raced as she stumbled backward, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. Holland appeared beside her, his face tense. "What is it? What did you see?" There was something. Someone standing right there. Amanda pointed toward the trees, her voice tight with panic. "It was right there, I swear." It was tall. Holland swept his flashlight over the area, his brow furrowing as he studied the scene. "There's nothing here, Amanda. You might have just—" "No," Amanda cut him off, her voice rising. "I know what I saw. It wasn't my imagination. Someone was watching me." Before Holland could respond, the strange mechanical hum returned, this time louder, closer. It sent a shiver down Amanda's spine. The sound was low and unsettling, vibrating through the air as though coming from all directions at once. "That sound," Holland whispered, his jaw clenched. "It's not natural." He grabbed his radio, speaking quickly to the rest of the search team. "This is Holland. We've got an unusual noise northeast of the camp. I need all available units to move in on this position. Something's not right." Within moments, the rest of the search party arrived, their flashlights cutting through the thick undergrowth. One of the rangers took point, his rifle at the ready. The group moved cautiously, tracking the source of the sound. Amanda stayed close to Holland, her eyes darting to every shadow, every rustle in the trees. As they pushed forward, the hum grew louder, more rhythmic, almost like machinery. The deeper they went, the more out of place it felt. Unnerving, mechanical sounds shouldn't be coming from the heart of a remote forest. Then, suddenly, the sound stopped again. The group halted, exchanging uneasy glances. A ranger moved ahead, parting some low-hanging branches. His flashlight fell upon something metallic, half buried in the forest floor. "What the hell is this?" the ranger muttered. Holland moved closer, motioning for Amanda to stay behind. He knelt down beside the object, brushing dirt and leaves away to reveal a small, rusted hatch. It was old, decades old by the look of it, covered in grime and moss, blending perfectly into the forest floor. "It's a door," Holland said, frowning. "Some kind of underground structure." Amanda stepped forward, her heart pounding in her ears. "What is this doing here? There's nothing like this on the trail maps." Holland stood, his expression grim. "Whatever it is, it's not supposed to be here." The ranger tugged at the handle of the hatch, but it barely budged. "It's rusted shut," he grunted, struggling to get a grip. "Must have been here for a long time." "Maybe this has something to do with Adam and Jessica," Amanda said, her voice barely a whisper. Maybe they found it? Or something found them," Holland added quietly, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. With a final pull, the ranger managed to pry the hatch open, the hinges groaning in protest. A cold, damp smell wafted up from the darkness below, like the air had been sealed off for years. Amanda's stomach churned, fear creeping in deeper. Holland shone his flashlight down into the opening. A ladder descended into what looked like an old bunker, its walls slick with moisture and dirt. "Stay up here," he ordered, before beginning his descent. Amanda watched as he disappeared into the darkness below, her heart thudding painfully in her chest. Minutes passed, and all she could hear was the sound of her own breathing. Then Holland's voice echoed up from below. "You need to see this." Against every instinct telling her to stay above ground, Amanda stepped toward the open hatch. Thomas and Sarah, pale and trembling, stood back, unwilling to venture down into the darkness. One of the rangers helped Amanda onto the ladder, and she slowly descended, the rungs cold beneath her hands. When her feet hit the floor of the bunker, a deep chill settled over her. The air was heavy with dampness, and the walls seemed to close in on her. Holland stood a few feet ahead, his flashlight casting long shadows across the room. Amanda's breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was seeing. The bunker was small, barely more than a single room. Old, rusted shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty, decaying equipment that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. But that wasn't what drew her attention. In the center of the room, lying on the cold concrete floor, were two backpacks. One was Adam's and the other was Jessica's. Amanda's knees nearly gave way as she rushed forward. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands trembling as she knelt beside Adam's pack. She recognized it instantly, the same one she had watched him pack 3 days ago, now abandoned in this strange, forgotten place. "They were here," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "They were right here." Holland remained silent, his flashlight sweeping the room. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no bodies, just the packs and an overwhelming sense of something deeply wrong. Amanda reached into Adam's backpack, pulling out his phone. The screen was cracked, and the battery was dead, but seeing it made everything feel so real, so immediate. "Where are they?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "We'll find them," Holland said, though his tone wasn't as confident as before. As they examined the room, another sound echoed through the bunker. It wasn't the hum this time, but something else. Footsteps. From above. Amanda's blood ran cold. The sound of footsteps, deliberate, slow, echoed from above the bunker, faint but unmistakable. She exchanged a terrified glance with Detective Holland, whose face hardened immediately. He motioned for silence, bringing his finger to his lips as they both froze in place, listening intently. The footsteps continued, pacing in an eerie rhythm just outside the open hatch, as if whoever or whatever it was knew they were down there. Amanda's heart pounded in her chest, each beat louder than the last. The bunker suddenly felt more like a tomb, trapping them in the dark while something waited above. "Stay here," Holland whispered, his hand reaching for the gun holstered at his side. He gestured for the ranger, who was halfway down the ladder, to hold position. "Don't make a sound." Amanda's hands gripped the straps of Adam's backpack, her knuckles white with tension. "What if it's them?" she whispered, barely able to contain her desperation. "What if it's Adam and Jessica?" Holland's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. He knew the chances were slim. The heavy, deliberate nature of the footsteps didn't match what he'd expect from lost, frightened teenagers. Whoever or whatever was moving above them wasn't stumbling or calling for help. It was searching. With quiet precision, Holland began to ascend the ladder, one slow step at a time. His flashlight was off now, his movements as silent as he could manage. Amanda's breath hitched as she watched him climb, her body frozen with fear. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to run, to get as far away from this place as possible, but her legs refused to move. At the top of the ladder, Holland paused, barely peeking over the lip of the hatch. The darkness outside was thick, but the beam of a distant flashlight glowed faintly through the trees, flickering with movement. Amanda could just make out the shape of Holland's hand gripping his gun as he slowly raised it. Then a deafening bang rang out, a gunshot from above. Amanda screamed, instinctively dropping to the ground and covering her head. Her ears rang as panic took over, her thoughts spiraling into chaos. She looked up just in time to see Holland retreat down the ladder, his face tight with grim determination. "Stay low," he ordered, his voice tense but calm. "We're not alone out here." "What's happening?" Amanda choked, panic rising in her throat. "Who fired that shot?" "I don't know yet," Holland replied, his gun drawn, eyes sharp. "But there's someone out there. And they're armed." Another ranger joined them in the bunker, his own weapon drawn, while the others remained above, securing the perimeter. The footsteps had stopped, but the air was thick with tension. Whoever was out there wasn't just wandering around, they were hunting. Amanda's mind raced with questions. Could this person have something to do with Adam and Jessica's disappearance? Were they being watched from the moment they entered the woods? A terrifying thought gripped her. What if the figure she'd seen earlier wasn't a hallucination or a trick of the light? What if someone had been stalking them all along? As they huddled in the bunker, the silence stretched on, broken only by the faint crackle of Holland's radio. One of the rangers stationed above was speaking. "Detective, we've got movement at the edge of the woods, multiple figures, heading toward the ridge. Do we engage?" Holland hesitated, his mind racing. "Hold your position," he finally replied. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet. Let them pass." Amanda's hands shook uncontrollably. What if they find Adam and Jessica? What if they already have them? Holland looked at her, his face grim. "We don't know that yet. But if they're out there, we'll find them." The moments dragged on, each one more agonizing than the last. Amanda felt as if time itself had slowed, stretching her fear into something unbearable. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the ranger's voice crackled through the radio again. "The figures are moving away, heading north. No direct contact. We're clear. For now." Relief washed over Amanda, but it was fleeting. The threat had passed, but only temporarily. Whatever or whoever had been outside wasn't gone. They were still out there, lurking in the forest, waiting. Holland motioned for the group to move. "We need to get back to the surface. This place isn't safe anymore." Amanda didn't argue. She followed Holland and the others back up the ladder, her legs unsteady, her mind buzzing with fear. As she climbed out of the hatch, the night air hit her face, cool and sharp. The forest was eerily quiet, the footsteps and gunshot now, just fading memories in the oppressive darkness. The search team gathered, flashlights cutting through the trees as they regrouped. Amanda stood close to Sarah and Thomas, who looked as pale and shaken as she felt. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Holland scanned the woods, his flashlight casting long, eerie shadows. "We keep looking. We can't stop now." As they prepared to press deeper into the forest, Amanda's phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped a beat as she fumbled to retrieve it, her hands shaking. The screen lit up an unknown number. With trembling fingers, she answered. "Hello?" There was a brief pause, followed by a sound that sent a chill down her spine, breathing slow, deliberate breathing, and then a voice, low and distorted, spoke just 2 words. "They're mine." The line went dead. Amanda stood frozen, her phone slipping from her trembling fingers and hitting the dirt with a dull thud. The distorted voice echoed in her mind, "They're mine." The air seemed to thicken around her, the chilling words filling her with a terror deeper than anything she had ever known. Detective Holland noticed her pale face. "Amanda," he asked, stepping closer. "What's wrong?" Someone just called me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They said, they're mine." Holland's expression darkened, and without a word he grabbed her phone and dialed Tulsker, and dialed the number back. But there was no signal, no way to trace the call. Suddenly, one of the rangers called out, "Over here. There's something. God, you need to see this." Amanda's stomach churned as she followed the group toward a clearing just beyond the tree line. The moment she saw it, her knees buckled, and she had to grip a nearby tree for support. Lying at the base of a thick oak tree were 2 bodies, partially covered by a tarp, hidden beneath leaves and brush. The pale beams of the flashlights revealed what Amanda had feared most. Adam and Jessica. Their faces were bruised, their clothes torn, but there was no mistaking who they were. Tears welled in Amanda's eyes as she crumpled to the ground, her body racked with sobs. Detective Holland knelt beside the bodies, his expression hard but sorrowful. "It looks like they've been here for days," he muttered to the rangers. "Whoever did this, they wanted us to find them." Amanda's heart shattered as she knelt beside her son, her hands shaking as she touched his cold, lifeless face. The world around her seemed to fade, replaced by an overwhelming sense of loss and grief. The forest, once a place of cherished memories, was now a graveyard. Detective Holland stood and placed a hand on Amanda's shoulder. "We'll catch whoever did this," he said, his voice firm but filled with quiet anger. "I promise." But as the night pressed in around them, Amanda knew the truth. The person responsible for Adam and Jessica's deaths was still out there watching, waiting. And no matter what Holland promised, the haunting words would echo in her mind forever. "They're mine." Just as the search team was preparing to leave the scene, a shadow moved at the edge of the woods. Sheriff Holland's instincts kicked in. He raised his gun, heart pounding, and fired a single shot into the darkness. The figure collapsed and the team rushed forward, flashlights cutting through the night. As they approached the body, they uncovered the face of the killer, Mr. Donovan, Adam and Jessica's history teacher. His eyes were wide, a sick smile frozen on his lips. Investigations would later reveal that Donovan had become obsessed with Jessica, his twisted mind driving him to follow them into the woods. When she rejected his advances, he snapped, taking both their lives in a final deranged act. The nightmare was over, but the damage was done. Adam and Jessica were gone, victims of a disturbed mind hidden in plain sight.